Welcome to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. My name is Tony D'Agostino. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. In this series of exclusive podcasts, we will meet with tenured and growing leaders in the childcare field, typically operating medium to very large childcare operations from tens of schools to thousands of schools. Our incentive is to learn what has been the path and traits that make outstanding leaders. Join us to glean the sage wisdom from these experienced individuals. Now, let's get started with ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders.
Welcome to ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Early Learning Leaders. This is Tony D'Agostino. I am the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360, and today's guest is Dean Pappous of the Gardner Schools. The Gardner Schools is an academically focused preschool for children ages 6 weeks to 6 years of age, with a vision of providing nurturing start for successful futures for children. They're headquartered in Franklin, Tennessee. However, they have schools all throughout Colorado, Illinois, Kentucky, Ohio, Minnesota, Tennessee, Virginia, DC, and Massachusetts. Dean has served as the CEO for the Gardner Schools for a little bit over a year, since 2024. He also sits on several different company boards, as well as the board of the Gardner School since 2004. Dean has also previously led Hearing Life as the chief executive officer for a number of years, where they focused on hearing care throughout the nation. In 2016 to 2019, Dean also served as the chief operating officer of Gold's Gym, where he basically led the evolution of the membership experience and oversaw the generation of sales, revenue, services throughout that organization. Before joining Gold's, he spent almost 20 years at 24 Hour Fitness, during which he grew it from 24 locations to well over 400 clubs. Dean started his career as a part-time personal trainer, held positions of increasing responsibility throughout his tenure, which I think you will learn from this oncoming podcast. Dean holds his MBA from the University of California at Los Angeles and a bachelor's degree in business management at St. Mary's College in California. Dean and his wife have 3 wonderful children and a spoiled English bulldog named Gus. So I'd like you to welcome today to our podcast, Dean Pappous of the Gardner Schools. How you doing, Dean?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, and thanks for making some time for us to talk.
Oh gosh, thank you for coming on and joining us on the podcast. We have Dean with Gardner Schools, and a few of you just probably heard from our intro, a little bit of his bio, that he is running Gardner Schools from us. And, Dean, I'm going to get into a few questions about your history and your background and things of that nature. But just on the outset, just give us the highest level about Gardner Schools.
Yeah, I love the Gardner School and what we do. I love kids, I always have. And, we provide a safe and nurturing environment for children for early care, and then also early childhood education. And so we see kids from 6 months to 5 years, primarily, some 6-year-olds as well, who are transitioning to kindergarten. And so that's what we do, and we do that in 8 states and the District of Columbia.
Awesome. And at the end of this, we'll get in a little bit more about you guys, but I want to learn more about you in this podcast. And, I tend to like to start off with a question, a little bit down the point of, in your formidable years, did you ever see yourself who would end up being a leader when you were just a kid? And was there any kind of indications to you that you might have a propensity for it?
It's a great question, Tony. And I think I'd be dishonest if I said no, and I say with all humility that from being a kid in my neighborhood, we were always out. First of all, I was so lucky to grow up in a place where there were so many kids on my block, and we were always out playing sports and doing different things and exploring and just having fun outside. I was barely ever in the house. I was always getting in trouble for coming home too late for dinner and all that.
You're in the mode.
I, in doing all of those events and sports and activities, I always would be in a position of leadership. Not the only one, but I'd be one of the kids, on the block that people look to, or that just had some success with athletics, which I think propelled me at the youngest age to a feeling of, hey, I can lead others, and I can be somebody that others rally around. And so that's really where it started for me, and that continued through my formative years and high school, and being a co-captain of my football team, and then in baseball as well. And so those were the places that I thrived and had introductions to leadership at the earliest stage of my life.
Wow. When you think back about that, do you feel that it was something that was just natural about you, or was it something where you just sort of had that energy that propelled you into it?
Well, I haven't reflected on that at any length. But as you asked me that question, I I think I did have a natural energy for other people. I'm a people person. I love other people. I love interacting with other people and accomplishing things together. And if I had to guess, I would say that others could sense my honest intention of getting things done for both our sake.
Yeah.
And I think that people can tell. I think all of us have instincts, and we can tell what other people um, have in mind, or what their intentions are. And mine are, and we're sincere in wanting to have fun with others and accomplish things with others. And so if I had to, I don't know, and I won't claim to know, but if I had to guess, I would say it was people sense that energy.
You know, and I think it's very interesting. I recently sent to my boys who are both in their college years or finishing college years. One of these
Yeah.
people will be getting out of college years. Um, I just sent them a TED talk, and it was about likability. And it really talked about really sort of the secret sauce in leadership is about likability. When you think about some of the people you surround yourself with, when you are hiring, recruiting, building teams, um, how much does likability play into that for you?
It's tremendous. And I think that's, by the way, that's great advice and guidance for your sons. And so good job in showing them the way. I'm always trying to figure that out with my kids too, is what do they need? I have three kids, two boys and a girl, and what do they need that is the same, and what do they need that's very maybe unique to their kind of personality and talents. But I think what you hit on there with them, with the likability factor, is something that's universal. And I think that it is really critical in my criteria that I use when I'm selecting my business partners. And it's, as I've gained more experience and gone on in life and in business, it's become more important.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that I'm a little bit more selective in what I do professionally, with less time remaining in my career. What I do professionally, there's criteria for that, and then who I do it with. And I mentioned to you that I love working with people, and I sincerely do, and I love all people. And if I'm going to go to work with them, then there are some additional criteria, and it has to be somebody who, for us to enjoy ourselves the most and have therefore the best odds of success. I look for somebody who's friendly smart, somebody who's got a lot of ability to contribute. They have a lot of potential. They care about what we're doing, but they do it in a way that has some grace, and demonstrate some EQ and interpersonal awareness in how they show up. And so that's what I would consider friendly smart. Is it doesn't intimidate, or it doesn't look to kind of put you down for their benefit or for their ego, but
Right.
instead it looks to lift others up around them. And so knowing when to get big, when to get small, when to be in front, when to be in back, and then having the versatility to be able to do it. And so I look for those things in especially our executive leadership team and my partners, who I'm super lucky to work with, who have that ability. So we can have a lot of success together, but also have a lot of fun, and then help other people who are trying to maybe have our jobs in the future
Right.
get there. That feels really good. It feels really good to help somebody who wants to accomplish something, and that matters a lot to me too. Is I want the folks around me to be super capable and able to lead the company where it needs to go, and I want them to be people who, for selfish reasons, love helping other people because it makes them feel good, and so those are the criteria that matter a lot to me and that I think about when you say likability.
Yeah. And when, and I'm jumping around here because sometimes I do this a little chronological, but I think with this thread a little bit, in your career, did you find yourself in situations, because a lot of times we go through situations where we go into an acquisition, and next thing we know, we have a boss that
Yeah,
we didn't choose, and vice
yeah.
versa. They have, you have staff that you didn't choose and what have you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation that I guess you would say is you're like, wow, this is just not the cultural fit? And what were some of the key indicators for you if you did?
Yeah, I was in that situation, and that in I've learned a lot. I'm really glad that I was, to be honest with you, as much as I didn't enjoy being in that situation from the standpoint of, gosh, I this isn't what I this isn't what I want to be doing and who I want to be doing it with, that didn't feel good. But I learned so much about what I do want from being in that experience. And what what really made it not for me was an inconsistency in what you would expect or what you would experience in going to work, and having partners who maybe um, didn't show up uh, with the same methodology or principles, or directionally, kind of working towards having it be a win-win relationship
Right.
for everybody involved. And what it really cemented for me was that beyond just work, because this is all just life and people, so
Yeah.
it's impossible to delineate, oh, these are my principles for my personal relationships versus my work relationships. We're all just people. And what it really cemented for me was that for any relationship to thrive long term and to be sustainable long term, it has to be a win-win relationship. Everybody has to benefit.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, what was not the right cultural fit for me was that that wasn't something that was generally valued by key players. And you felt that, earlier we talked about how we all have intuition, and you can sense other people's intentions. And so when it's unpredictable, or when it's something that changes too dramatically, then trust erodes. And then when trust isn't there, then it's hard to really, gosh, if we're going to go do something really hard together that's worthwhile, um, it's hard to go energized in that journey when you're not really sure your business partner is maybe wanting the same things as you.
And you bring up another good point. It's come up in another podcast before, but it's something I think is very much at the core of success in organizations, and that is trust. And, for yourself, how, as leaders, we tend to have to be a shepherd of trust.
Mm-hmm.
For you, how do you tend to get that out to the flock? How do you
Yeah.
tend to, I'm sorry to use these parables from like, around
No,
Easter,
yeah,
but it's the truth though.
it
How
is,
do
and
you,
it's what we all understand. So
right.
yeah, I get it.
So how do you tend to get this out to your partners, your teams, people that you have a responsibility to, as well as they have responsibility to you? How do you get that trust out to them?
I'd like to, I'm thinking of a couple of different headlines that over the course of my career have evolved for me in terms of my understanding and have led to how I do this today. And the first is through honesty and humility. And I attempt to, I don't, and by the way, Tony, I don't always get it right. And
Join the party.
yeah, um, but when I do, what I accomplish is honesty and humility, regardless of my audience, regardless of the circumstance. And it is something that I think when I say has evolved with me over time. The way I understand it is that the reason I'm more capable of honesty and humility today versus at any point up to now in my career and in my life isn't because I'm a fundamentally more honest person today. It's because I have more maturity, and maturity has helps you with honesty and humility. You realize that we don't have to hide. Everything we are is visible to and transparent to everybody anyway. And the only thing that isn't immediately transparent is if you know who you are. They already know who you are, and if you're comfortable with it. And through honesty and humility, you communicate a self-awareness to others. And that leads to a higher level of trust. Like, okay, this guy or woman knows who they are and they've got it, right? And they already know you're not perfect. They just need to know if you know where you aren't. And so that honesty and humility is so fundamental for me with regard to trust. And then the other is one that comes from competency and character, and that's competency has to be a lifelong journey of improvement. And you mentioned something earlier about what you had sent to your sons, and that's a product of you continuing to improve yourself so you can be a better, as a result, you're a better dad to them. And in your work, as you improve and you're not as good as you were 5 years ago, or last year, but you're better, that means you can contribute more to the people around you, and your competency level goes up. So they trust that their odds of success are better with you because your competency continues to improve, and therefore your ability to help and support them is better than it was a year ago. And then character is just they trust that you are, even though you're not always getting it right, that you're always trying to get it right, and that you're doing things for everybody's benefit and for the success of the team or the organization or the family or whatever the group is that you're a part of. And so they know that even though you're not working within maybe each other's sight or oversight on a regular basis, that in absence, they are trusting that you're doing everything you can for the collective success of that team and organization. And so that's I think the character part of it as well. And so those are the things that honesty and humility and the way we interact with other people and we communicate, being on a continuous improvement journey. So we're always getting better and we can contribute more. And then our intentions are in the right place. We're trying to do what's best for everyone involved.
Yeah, well, substantial. And, you talked about a few things earlier about the kind of people that you like to focus on. I'm hiring, friendly, but smart, kind, grace, EQ, honesty, humility, a few of these things. When you look at when you're young in the very formative years, whether it be, in college or coming out of school or starting your first jobs, or you looked at who your influences were those characteristics that you felt that you had some very strong influences back then, or are these some things that you just were like, well, I had to pick them up on my way because I didn't have that resource to me when I was young?
I think I had people, whether they were teachers, coaches, family members, my parents, older brothers, where all of those characteristics that you just mentioned that we've talked about so far were represented by some in that group.
Right.
And I had to aggregate and kind of learn as I went, and learn from experiences, and maybe, try a lot of trial and error, um, and then but mostly just overcome my own shortcomings, and so, but they all showed me and had an example of these various characteristics that were positive examples. And then over the course of my own experience, I realized the significance of these different things and the benefit of them. And I wanted to get better in those areas. I noticed where I was too arrogant, and I noticed where I was too limited in my, kind of acceptance of how to be successful. Like there was one way, and it was my way, and I realized through just that not working, and me doing terrible as a result of that, and not succeeding, and just then life maturity. I realized how those things were holding me back. And then I looked to those people, my dad, my brothers, my sister, my coaches, other professors that I had, where I was like, oh gosh, that's so much better than me. That's so much better than what I do. I'm gonna borrow that and start trying it, and I did it. I'll give you an example. I
Yeah.
was I was in a class where halfway through the class, the professor elicited feedback from the group on how the semester was going. Anonymous, digital. So we all submitted it. In the next class, he he shared it. He showed it, and he listed all of the things that were said, and some of them weren't very kind. But he listed all of them, and then he was non-defensive about the feedback, and then he said what he was going to do to improve the second half of the semester as a result of what was provided for him. And I, to this day, do that once a year with my team. I ask for their
That's awesome.
feedback, like a start, stop, continue. And I then read all the things that were said, some of them not very kind, deservedly. And then I say what I'm going to do, and then like halfway through the year, I give them a progress report, and at the end of the year, I go back to it when we start the next cycle. And the reason I do that is that his humility and openness, and not and I'm sure so many of those comments he could have said, yeah, but so and so, but he did.
Right.
He just, in his lack of having a need to explain and just owning it and moving on, taught me two things. One is that his credibility went up, skyrocketed, for the whole class and for me by doing that. Secondly, he role modeled that when you're in charge, you're responsible for things that aren't your fault, as well as things that are, or things that are just happenstance and they're nobody's fault. And that's why his credibility went up. And I realized it, and it was nothing that I would ever, prior to that experience, I would have argued if I thought something was unfairly characterized, and to defend myself, and it was to my own detriment. And so, like, that's an example of borrowing from other people's work, translating it to like how it fits your life and your ambitions. And I did that with I was able to do that with all of those different kind of characters in my life that you mentioned.
I think that's, absolutely a wonderful thought process around there, because I think of people who might be listening to this. Sometimes they're negotiating with themselves and their brain. Did I do something wrong? Or maybe I need to prove myself, or
Yeah.
maybe I should push it under the rug. Nobody will notice it. I remember when I was young, one of the areas I think I dealt with were some challenges, and I won't make this a therapy session for you, but but I remember when I was playing football, and a coach, he's like, "Why'd you miss this pass?" And
Yeah.
he had every excuse, and he was like, "D'Agostino, you're out." And I'm like, I was out for the rest of the game, and I came to his office after. I was like, "Why am I out?" And it's because you didn't take responsibility, you just blamed. You just didn't take responsibility. And it was a hard, cold lesson
Oh,
that he just smacked me upside the head with. Now, I won't say I learned everything overnight,
yeah.
but
Me
I,
too.
it was one of those things where I had to deal with criticism. And I think you're talking about how to be authentic to push through criticism. Do you have any, was it with you a journey over time, or did you have any aha moments like the one you had with your professor that you were like, okay, I just received criticism and prior to this, I defended myself. Now I'm like, okay, how do I absorb this? Because it really probably is going to help me in the long run.
Oh my gosh, absolutely a journey over time. And I'll tell you a journey I'm still on. And there are times or days or circumstances where I don't, I'm just not, I'm feeling more insecure for whatever reason,
Right.
or I'm just not my best that day, or it's a new situation and I don't already have a bunch of credibility in the bank with this partner or whatever, like those are circumstances where it's more likely for me to feel defensive and not take the criticism as well as I want to. And that still happens. I think I'll always,
Yeah.
be on that journey. But I am, in a much better place than I was. And I think the way that that's happened is me just recognizing that we we all have strengths and opportunities, and to think that you're maybe consistently only playing to your strengths or showing up, the right way, it's just not a very objective way of thinking about things. And so um, it also doesn't mean that you aren't good or capable or talented or well-intentioned. And so I think it's the ability to not associate a negative meaning to taking ownership over a certain situation or circumstance that helps me. It isn't what happened, it's the story I tell myself about what happened that's improved. And so if I got something wrong or didn't do my best, what it would mean for me is that I wasn't as good as maybe I hoped that I was. So it was really harder for me to accept that. And of course, I would get defensive and fight against it because the alternative was having to admit that I'm not good or as good as I want to be. And so that's the difference in the story that I tell myself is now at this stage of my life, I understand that there's going to be times where I do better than others. There's going to be times where I had the right read and I made the right pass, so to speak. And there's going to be another time where I didn't. It doesn't mean I'm not good. It just means wasn't good. I didn't do as good as I wanted to on that play. And so that makes it a lot easier. It lowers the threshold in taking ownership because now taking ownership doesn't mean I'm not good.
Right.
It just means I didn't get that situation right. And let me be energized by that to figure out why. So I reduce the amount of times I don't get it right going forward. So I think that's the process I think I have gone through. There's one other thing that I want to share on this topic
Yeah.
that I think might be helpful for others is when you are doing well earlier in your career, there's less of that criticism because you're aspiring and because you're in charge of less and because the degree of difficulty as a result isn't as high. And so you get used to maybe a higher success rate. And so all of a sudden now you're in a different role, or maybe you're an owner, or maybe you're just in charge of more team members. And as a result of that scope expanding, your success rate's going to go down. And so now you're having to face the realization of, gosh, I'm not like this. I'm not like the superstar player on every play or every month or every year. I'm not the person of the year every year now, and so that's a transition. You're like, gosh, I used to be so successful, but it's just that your degree of difficulty has shifted,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's hard psychologically. You've got to adjust to that, and that's part of maturity. And so that at at earlier stages of taking on more responsibility can also get in your way. And so I just want to share that in case anyone listening might benefit from hearing that progression that I went through.
No, I think it's really insightful, Dean, for a number of reasons, but one that just resonates with me right out of the gate is a lot of times, like childcare owners, what have you, they were successful with having an in-home. They went out, they started their own, and you know what? People just started showing up. People started loving what was going on. And then they were like, hey, we're going to start doing a few extra schools. That started working out great. And then like, hey, we're going to franchise, and no one comes knocking. And then all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
something's different and I must now be a failure. No, I think what you're saying is, you know, those of us who tend to try to progress, we tend to push our chips in a little bit more and a little bit more. And sometimes the house is going to win, you know.
Yeah, way too often. In
way
my
too
case.
Not that I have much experience here, but with that said,
Yeah.
when that happens, the way, I think a lot of us do is we do our best to learn and hopefully not completely retreat from it.
Yes.
So, and I'm flipping the conversation a little bit because, we got in depth really quick, but I find your ascension interesting because I was just reading some background on you, and it said you started as a personal trainer, a part-time personal trainer. And next thing you know, you're running as the CEO of an expanding, growing, caring facility for putting out the wonderful next generation of kids. How the heck does that happen?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I've been so fortunate. I've had now roughly a 30-year career, and I was a student athlete. I had a friend who was working as a part-time personal trainer. This is in I grew up in San Jose, California, and he was working a 24-hour Nautilus at the time, which later became 24-hour Fitness. This is 1994. I won't bore you with this story, other than to say it immediately gave me an opportunity to recognize that helping others in whatever small way I contributed to them improving their health and well-being was so rewarding for me, and it energized me. And it wasn't like work. And then I that stayed with me and is still with me today. And then the ability to communicate effectively and maybe compel and persuade and influence and inspire. I noticed I had maybe some natural talent there that I could cultivate, and it allowed me to be successful, and the company was growing really fast, and I spent 20 years there, and I had so many incredible opportunities because of how fast the company was growing, which really helped my development. But what was true in that organization, in industry, in fitness industry, was true in my next industry, which was hearing care, was consumer healthcare, was that the consumer was better off doing business with us than they were not, in terms of their well-being. And that is true. As I stepped into hearing care, I recognized that we had a product and service that not only helped people to hear and solve the physical issue, but that people who suffer from a hearing loss are people who end up isolated, are people who tend to be maybe suffering from accelerated cognitive decline, and the isolation and lack of confidence to be in public leads them to be sedentary. So when you solve for that, they kind of come back. They re-enter relationships that they had backed out of, so they're not a burden on their loved ones. They're more active. So just like in the fitness space, going to a place of physical well-being that was improved, the same thing was true with people who had a hearing loss. They had a transformative experience that was disproportionately meaningful than just the physical ailment. Same thing with fitness. And so the social value was a common theme. And then stepping into leading early childhood education, as meaningful as those were, I don't know what could be more impactful than a nurturing environment start for our kids that leads to a higher rate of success in their future. I mean, that not only for the child, him or herself, but just for society at large and what it means for our future. I don't think you can make an argument that there's much that's more impactful than what we're doing. So it's also mission centric. And so I like to I like to work hard. I like to compete. I like to have fun at what we do, and I like to accomplish things. And I also want to know that all of that work is being done in an effort that's good for everybody, and that the people who do business with us, whether it is to get in better shape or to hear better or to have a better educational start and foundation for their children, that they're so much better off. Their value proposition is so strong, and they're so much better off doing business with us than they otherwise would be because of how valuable our services and products are to them. And so that I think has been the common theme throughout the industries that I've worked in, and it is very energizing for me.
Well, when you mention it and I think about it from what you're saying, you actually have a really great story, Dean, in the sense that the entities you're working for were all about human improvement. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it really was. It's the physical health. It's here. I can relate to the hearing thing. I was in a rock band for 30 years playing lead guitar. So
Oh.
there's a lot of times where I'm at events and I'm nodding my head and I'm like, I asked you a question, DiAugustino. Why don't you answer me? Because I can't hear a word you're saying.
I don't know what you said. Yeah.
But with that said, though, and then us getting into this industry too, where the output is tremendous for our future. When you were making the decision to decide to sort of make that leap, that chasm from the hearing solutions to the childcare solutions, was there anything that you were thinking about holding you back or going, wow, this is definitely a different industry and I should really think about it before I make that leap?
I definitely thought about it for sure. And I was really happy in my previous organization. And I was there over 5 years. And, we were a national organization and operated in 42 states. And we had a really robust business, almost 700 clinics in our company. And so leaving that, because of how good all of that was something that I absolutely considered deeply and for an extended period. The reason I did it anyway is number one, because of how successful the transition was for me from fitness to hearing care, in that it provided an opportunity for accelerated growth for me. I found myself in a place after almost 24, 25 years in one industry. I found myself in a place where a lot of my skills and experience transferred over with me and were relevant in the new industry. And then there was a bunch that wasn't, that I was just a new student in.
Right.
And I had to learn. And a lot of that, whether it was, the first thing comes to mind is how you deal with insurance companies and revenue cycle management and billing and all of that was not a part of my first industry, but was very central to this last industry. And so, you know, I had to put myself in a position where I had to humble myself and I had to go be a good student. But it helped me grow and develop, not just technically, but in being able to engage other people and get other people to feel good about helping me to learn. And so when an opportunity to step into a different industry came up for me again, the affiliation I had with that was opportunity for growth. I can get myself into a situation where there's things I'm not going to know, and I can learn those things, and I trust the people around me to be helpful and good teachers, because I trust in the good intentions of people. And that's exactly what's happened. And so I've had a chance to really learn and grow, and then independent of that, build something with the Gardner School that was a chance that I didn't have in my previous organization. My previous organization was really well established when I went there and started leading it. And so this is a different stage of growth. And so this isn't maybe refining and optimizing what someone who came before me built, but this is us taking this organization to the next level and building upon an incredible entrepreneurial and early stage success that my predecessor and the founder had, and did such an incredible job of setting up over 20 years, setting up this organization to differentiate itself and mostly to provide incredible opportunities for children from 6 months to 6 years, and now hand the baton to me so graciously to now go and scale that and do that in more states and in more locations and be able to make it work. And so having a chance to build that next hyper growth phase of the organization successfully was also a great business challenge that appealed to me.
Yeah, and there's something that you just mentioned. It was funny because I was about to mention it to you, but you talked about entrepreneurship, and you also earlier talked about developing competency. Entrepreneurship and competency sort of go down different paths at times, because you're going oftentimes into areas that you don't have competency in.
Yeah.
But when you look at your journey, like you mentioned about, you are now really an entrepreneur or entrepreneur leader with an entrepreneurial team, right?
Yeah.
Who's getting there. When you look at that, and we have people who listen in here, oftentimes they think that, a little bit about pushing your chips in and things that are difficult and risks. What have you noticed that's different about this role than your previous ones about being an entrepreneur, where you don't have a backstop? You don't have someone there who's probably going to catch you because your business has been through that experience before.
Yeah. What I've noticed is not having that backstop, or not having a more established, scaled in terms of scaled organization with the corresponding infrastructure, is that I have had to be more of a player coach, and I've enjoyed it and loved doing it. And I think that this stage company, if maybe that isn't what you want to do, which is totally, this isn't a right or wrong, this is a more just personal preference, right? Like if you aren't wanting to be more of a player coach and do a lot of the work and be into the details and bottom up build, some of the infrastructure, people, process, program, that technology that needs to be in place, then it's probably not the best place to be. But for me, it's been energizing. What you talked earlier about learning from all of the influences in our lives, or which ones maybe I learned from. My parents had a quote in the family that my siblings and I used to roll our eyes at, but now I'm so happy that they shared with us. They used to say that don't be afraid of work. Work should be afraid of you. Me too. I love it now, but I didn't love it when I was a kid because it usually meant we had to do more chores.
Yeah.
But it was very fundamental in what they instilled in us. My parents were immigrants and came here from Greece and had that sort of, immigrants sensibility.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. And so coming here and having to do that is not. There are days where it's exhausting, of course, and days where I'm like, have to shake off some of the adversity that you face. But I love it, and I love that there is adversity and that there's tension and that things are hard and it's not easy to build. It's not easy to build something, and that challenge, and then therefore the worthwhileness of the accomplishment of building it. I love doing all of that, but it is different than my previous organizations that were at a different scale and therefore had more resources and infrastructure and required different things of me than this company requires at this point.
Yeah, and you bring up some more thoughts that I start to ponder about. And it is one of the things, especially with leading teams in an entrepreneurial environment, we sometimes forget that we're not the only one on that entrepreneurial journey. Everybody with you, all your teammates, are also there, but they're also looking to you to say, "Hey, how do we get there? How are we getting there?" When you have failure or setback happen with teammates that report up to you, and I think this is a common thing we all have within our organizations that occur. and you have to help coach them, remediate them, support them, or take them in a direction that may not be the most positive. What to you are the most important traits when dealing with teammates in that nature, when either success hasn't occurred, objectives haven't been met, focus is not contiguous with where you're trying to bring the organization? How do you deal with them? What kind of traits do you think are important to deal with people like that?
I think that empathy has to lead your actions. I'll tell you why I say that, besides what might be obvious. The people, especially that you work with, that I work with, they're all wanting to do a good job and they care, right? It isn't that you've hired somebody. I mean, if that's the case, it's a totally different, conversation, but that isn't the case. We have people who are working really hard and dedicating their talent and their time at an opportunity cost to them, to your company and to your team. And it's an opportunity cost because they could be dedicating that somewhere else. And they've chosen to hook their ladder to this building. And so when things don't go the way that they want them to, it's disappointing. And I think that if you show up, and I try to coach myself on this because I have missed on this before. When you show up leading with disappointment about what they didn't do for you or for the team, that can be really painful, and upsetting for a person. And so what I try to lead with is an empathy in understanding that, hey, if they could have done better, they would have, because they definitely want to. And so let me try to understand what might be getting in their way. And so I like to have a conversation where I really am expanding my understanding beyond the acknowledgement that it wasn't a success, but instead trying to figure out why maybe it wasn't a success and how much of that can I own first to then create some reciprocity, where they don't feel blamed, and they don't feel like they're having a finger pointed at them and being isolated. But instead they feel like, hey, we're going to be shoulder to shoulder. Like what I want my teammates, when I get it right, what I want my team members to feel like is that when they have failed at something or they have not had a success, stumbled, that's when I'm the closest to them, that I'm shoulder to shoulder with them in those moments. And when they're thriving and succeeding, that I am out of their way. And that is what I try to accomplish. So I try to lead with empathy so they don't feel like I'm blaming them. And then I try to understand what is maybe an external factor or the company's, miss or my miss. So I can create some reciprocity there, hopefully, in them also taking ownership over what was their miss.
Yeah, and you mentioned success. How do you help your team celebrate success when success happens?
I love encouraging celebrating each other. And I think role modeling that, first of all, talking about it, saying, hey, this is going to be fundamental that we're doing too many hard things together to not celebrate and encourage each other. And so I think as you do it as the leader, invariably people start to emulate that behavior. And then when they start to celebrate each other, um, not interjecting and thinking that you have to now say something or also compliment or celebrate, otherwise it's not as valid. And I think if you can know when to when they start celebrating each other and you can just stay quiet and let them have it, that exchange as a team without you being involved, then I think that really nurtures a togetherness and a true team spirit and camaraderie. And so those are the state it, make sure you're explicit that it's important, role model it, and then don't feel like unless you say it too, it doesn't have as much validity.
So give me, if you don't mind, an
Yeah.
example. You could share an example of where you guys had a success, whether it was just recent or past year or so. And how did you guys celebrate it or let them celebrate it? Or how did, what was something that you felt was a great way to approach it?
Yeah, so we have this list of schools that we identify as our priority schools. And they're schools that we want to accelerate the growth rate of. And so we do some extra things. You know, we put some extra marketing investment, and more of the multi-unit leaders are spending time with these schools and so forth. We reevaluate on a quarterly basis. And for the first time after a year, we were able to graduate a couple of those schools just at the end of Q1, so just end of March last month. We were able to graduate a couple of schools from that list. It's the first time ever, because it's only a year. I've only been here 15 months. And they were schools that had been stuck for a while in terms of their growth rate, and the team, not me, but the team collectively, our operations leaders, mostly the school leadership, our marketing team working together, uh, got them unstuck, and they got growing, and they had some great success. And so we have a monthly all hands call, or company wide virtual meeting that we have.
Sure.
And on that virtual meeting, this is, by the way, I'm going to give you an example of me being out of the way too. This happened last week, and it was the first one since I've worked here that I wasn't hosting it because I was on vacation. And so the team had it, and I was purposeful about them having it without me. And on in that meeting, we celebrated the executive school directors of these two schools and their teams, and had a picture of them, talked about in the meeting some of the things that they did in front of the entire organization, that led to them being successful. And we sent them a nice little gift to each of the schools and the directors, and made a really big deal about their accomplishment. And so instead of it being something where, oh gosh, I'm on this list of schools that is maybe identified as not doing as well as we want, instead it became an opportunity for a lot of accomplishment that then, in front of all of their peers, they not only were celebrated, but they had a chance to share the best practices that led to their success, so other people could
Awesome.
benefit from their experience too.
That's awesome. That's great
Yeah.
stuff right there. And you're taking some of the things that we talked about with that, with empathy for your people, but celebrating your people. If you're, if we had new leaders who are trying to ascend to greater heights, who are listening to this, what would you give them as guidance as to your philosophy around development of your culture?
Oh, you have to care about how it feels to work in your company, and then put yourself in the shoes of people who work in your company to see things from their perspective, to then understand where you can invest. I would apply what I try to do is apply the same research understanding as we do with our customer. And we say, voice of the customer, and have a consumer journey and optimize it to build the value proposition. I think the first customer that all of us have are our team members. Understanding their journey, the team member journey, understanding what they want, care about, just like you want to know what your customer wants, cares about, and then optimizing their experience to provide that and to invest in it in whatever responsible way that you can each year, increasing the contributions that you make to the team member experience. I think that not necessarily the results of those investments.
Mhm.
I think the evidence of that passion and intent to try to do that for them is what builds the culture. And so that would be the advice I would give, along with don't give up, because there's going to be times that are tough, quarters that are tough, years that are tough. And as the degree of difficulty increases, like we talked about earlier, and as these obstacles visit you, it's easy to, and a lot of people do, uh, hang it up at that point in whatever way they do, and that isn't a criticism. That may be the right thing for them to do, but but people also need leaders who won't, and who will lead the way forward and overcome those real legitimate obstacles. There's always real reasons, not excuses. There's always real and legitimate reasons why you can't be successful. And there's also legitimate reasons why you can. And so understanding the real obstacles, not to have them as reasons to not proceed, but to understand what you're up against so you can overcome it and be successful anyway. That I think, passion, energy, and commitment is something that I would also want to underscore.
Well, I appreciate you going through that and underscoring it for sure. We already blew through an hour. I don't know how it happened so quick.
Sorry,
It felt like 10 minutes.
I
But
might have been accused of being long-winded before, Tony.
no,
So you
not
didn't
at
know what you were
all.
getting into.
Actually, rather salient points, which I'm very appreciative of, because I think we've been able to build a really easy conversation on it. And
Me too. Thank you.
no problem at all. One question before I'd like to ask you a little bit more, just to tell us about Gardner a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just one last question. If you were to give any, and this could pair it to some of the things you're saying before, or just what your thoughts are, if you are giving guidance to any other leaders or operators who want to get to the next level, obviously we heard things about not giving up, being kind, being empathetic, celebrating successes, things of that nature. Is there any other, thoughts that you have about what what you think it takes to help get to the next level?
I just think that I want to reinforce that humility wins. That you don't get to the next level by having the answers and by having arrived. And I've seen that stop more people's ascension than anything else. It isn't a lack of talent. It's not a lack of IQ. It isn't anything that is a predetermined or inherent shortcoming. It's not having enough humility to keep growing and learning, and to understanding that there's multiple right ways of doing things. There's multiple approaches. You can learn from all of them, and that uh, as you take an approach where you want to understand better, that that you are looking for the right questions to ask for yourself and for the team members around you, you're gonna learn how to connect with people. You're gonna learn when to talk, when to not. You're gonna learn how to approach certain challenges in given ways. All the things that you won't learn if you already have all the answers. And so I think that being coachable, being committed to your own self-improvement, and having the humility to be able to accomplish those things, that's the advice I would have. And then I always remind myself of, on that note, that arrogance repels, I think humility disarms, and confidence attracts. And there is something about a humble confidence that I think is the most attractive and sticky type of leadership.
Great words to finalize with. So I appreciate it. With Gardner Schools, what is sort of your vision for the future? Where are you guys going? If there's anybody listening to this,
Yeah.
because I'd love to be part of that. Tell us a little
Thank
bit.
you. Yeah. And thank you for asking me about that. I'm so excited. So I've been here 15 months. What we're doing is, my predecessor and founder, Scott Thompson, did an incredible job of starting this business and growing it to something that many people wanted to invest in 20 plus years later. And so he did that and was able to retire, chose to retire, and the next phase here that we're in, this next ownership phase, is one of rapid hyper growth, and it's meant to take what was, I think, an organization and culture and product with regard to the facilities themselves and the service we provide, top scale, top end in the industry, and expand it to many other places. And so what we're doing is we're infilling. We want to have at least 7 to 10 schools in all the states we operate in, and we don't. And so in places like Colorado and Minnesota and Tennessee and Ohio, we're rapidly growing. We're entering new markets, which we did just starting in December of 2024 in Massachusetts. And we already have 3 schools open in Boston. We're opening another one next month. And by the end of 26, we should have 8 to 10 schools there and beyond. And so we're expanding in like Northern Virginia, DC, and other places. But the underlying objective is to more than double the store count, school count of the organization, and to do that by building new schools, which is going to be our primary growth engine, and complement that through acquisitions. And what we would like to add to our organization are schools that are well established, in place, and maybe we're also started in an entrepreneurial way. And somebody now wants to maybe retire or exit the industry, and they're looking for an ownership or a company that can come in and take over their school that they can trust, that they know cares about the children first, families, the team members that they've probably worked with for years, and who want to be a part of our journey going forward, which is to not only provide our offering everywhere, but have our offering be the best place to get early child care education, or just child care if your child is younger. And so you can feel really good about who you're handing your business off to. So we want to grow through building our own schools, adding acquisitions to our organization. And we want people who are maybe considering, hey, who's the right buyer for my business? Maybe I have 1 to 5 schools, 1 to 10 schools, and I want to sell it. I want to sell it to a group of people who genuinely care about all their constituents, their children, their families, their team members, and deliver a great service, high quality service. That's us. And every month and every quarter, we are passionately committed to doing a better job at all of those things, so we deliver better results to everybody involved with the Gardner School.
Awesome. Well, it looks like you hitched your wagon pretty well to a pretty good endeavor. And, I want to say, Dean, thank you so much for joining us today. We went about 2 minutes over, but I hope people can deal with that. But again, thank you so much. So I do want to conclude and not only take the time to thank Dean and his team, because it's not just him, but it's also his assistant I've dealt with a few times, and she's wonderful to get this thing set up for us. But I want to thank everybody on here who has joined the ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. And hopefully you have an opportunity to gain some nuggets of interest out of here that can help you get to the next level. And don't hesitate, if you're out there and you're interested in different leaders or different people you'd like to participate with, bring them to us. We'd love to learn more about those who we might not be in our scope today. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
You have been listening to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. Thank you very much for listening. We are greatly appreciative of your time. We will continue to produce these programs on an ongoing basis, and please hit the download button and subscribe to our podcast so you do not miss an episode. Thank you very much, and hope you have a wonderful day.